The sound hit first. A low, grinding roar that didn't come from any mouth or machine, but from the walls themselves, vibrating through the floorboards and up into their bones. Dust shook from the ceiling in thin, gray curtains, and the air turned heavy, thick enough to choke on. Evan staggered backward, clutching the frame of the hallway door, his eyes darting to the far end, where the shadows had deepened into something almost solid. Behind him, the beam from Claire's flashlight danced wildly across peeling wallpaper, illuminating fragments of old photographs they hadn't noticed before. Faces warped and blurred, some with eyes scratched out. "Don't move," she whispered. Her voice wasn't trembling, but her hand was. From somewhere inside the dark mass at the hallway's end, a shape began to form. Human enough to be recognized, wrong enough to be feared. And as it stepped forward, the floor groaned in time with the sound still rumbling in the walls, like the house was breathing with it. Claire's light found its face, or what should have been a face, and froze there. Pale skin stretched too tight over the skull. A mouth that seemed sewn shut, though the skin strained with something moving underneath. Evan swallowed hard. "That's—" "I know," Claire said, cutting him off. Her voice cracked now, the calm breaking. "It's her. From the footage." The thing tilted its head at the sound of her voice, and the photographs on the wall began to curl inward, their edges blackening. The air tasted like burnt paper. Claire's grip on the flashlight tightened as she stepped back, pulling Evan with her, but each step they took seemed to stretch the hallway longer, the end pulling away as if the house itself was shifting to keep them inside. Then came the whisper, not from the figure, but from all around them. It was the same phrase they'd heard on the cracked camera tape from the 2003 crew, only now it was louder, layered, countless voices overlapping in a sick chorus. "Don't let it in." The figure took another step. This time, its sewn mouth tore just slightly at the corners. The tear widened as the figure's mouth began to move, the skin splitting soundlessly until the first wet syllables slipped out. "You already did." Claire's breath hitched, and Evan felt her nails dig into his arm. The words weren't just spoken. They seemed to crawl under his skin, lodging there like splinters. The walls on either side of them rippled, the peeling wallpaper lifting in long strips that floated outward like ribbons in water. Shapes shifted behind the plaster, pressing forward from inside. Faces, hundreds of them, each mouthing something silently. Claire swung the flashlight wildly, the beam cutting across the hallway and catching a door that hadn't been there before, about 10 feet away. A door with an old brass handle, its wood stained almost black. "That's not—" Evan started. "It's our way out." Claire snapped. Her voice was sharp, but her eyes betrayed the fear she was holding back. They ran. The grinding in the walls rose to a deafening roar, and the floor buckled under each step, like they were sprinting across the back of something alive. The figure didn't chase them. It didn't need to. The shadow it cast was stretching ahead of them, reaching the door before they could. Claire reached for the handle, her fingers brushing the cold brass, and the door burst open from the other side. A man stood there, breathing hard, his clothes decades out of style. His hands and face were streaked with ash, and slung over his shoulder was a camera. Its lens cracked exactly like the one they'd seen in the recovered footage. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. His eyes darted past them to the shadow at the end of the hall. "It's not done with me yet, but it will be with you." Before they could react, He grabbed Claire's wrist and yanked her through the doorway. Evan stumbled after them, and the roar cut off the instant they crossed the threshold. They stumbled into a narrow stairwell, the light here dim and sepia-toned, as though they'd stepped inside an old photograph. The air was warmer, heavier, carrying the faint smell of mildew and something metallic beneath it. Blood, maybe, though Evan didn't want to confirm. The man released Claire's wrist and backed down the steps, motioning for them to follow. "Don't speak too loud," he said, his voice a strained whisper. "It hears everything." Claire hesitated. "Who are you?" He kept moving. "I was here before you, before anyone thought to make a movie about this place, 2003. We thought we were documenting a haunting. We didn't know the house could change itself." Evan's chest tightened. "You're with the crew." The man stopped on the landing, his silhouette haloed by a single swaying bulb. For a moment, Evan thought he wouldn't answer, but then he nodded once. "I'm the only one left." Claire's voice was barely audible. "What happened to the others?" He looked up at her, and in that instant, she wished she hadn't asked. It kept them. It wears them now. Evan remembered the faces pressing against the walls, their mouths opening soundlessly. His stomach turned. They reached the bottom of the stairs, where a corridor stretched out ahead. It was lined with shelves packed with objects, rusted tools, weathered toys, stacks of yellowing papers tied with string. Some things looked ancient, others newer, as if the house had been collecting for centuries. Claire reached for a small wooden horse on one of the shelves. Its paint was faded, and one leg was splintered. But when her fingers brushed it, she felt a pulse. Faint, like a heartbeat. She jerked her hand back. The man noticed. "Don't touch them. They belong to it now. Anything it takes, it keeps alive. In its way." They kept walking. The corridor seemed endless, each shelf offering glimpses of things they almost recognized. Claire swore she saw the same leather-bound notebook that had been sitting on the desk upstairs, only now it was covered in dust and a faint smear of something dark. After what felt like minutes or hours, the hallway opened into a larger room. At its center sat a low table covered in photographs, spread out in neat rows. The man moved to them and picked one up, holding it toward Claire. It was a picture of her and Evan, standing in the very hallway they'd just fled. But the background was wrong. The wallpaper was intact, vibrant, and lit by sunlight. Outside the window behind them was a bright, cloudless sky. "This is from before," the man said, "before it became what it is now." Evan shook his head. "That's impossible. We weren't here then." The man gave a humorless smile. "You were. You just don't remember yet." Claire stared at the photograph. Her throat felt dry. "What does that mean?" "It means this place isn't just haunted," the man said quietly. "It's hungry, and when it pulls you in, it doesn't just keep you. It rewrites you, makes you part of the story it's been telling over and over since the first stones were laid. That's why it feels familiar." The bulb, overhead, flickered, and from somewhere beyond the room came a faint, dragging sound. The man's head snapped toward the noise. "It's found us." He shoved a stack of photographs into Claire's hands. "If you want a chance, you have to take these and go back the way you came. Don't look at anything too long, and if it talks to you, don't answer." Evan's heart pounded. "What about you?" The man slung the cracked camera off his shoulder and started toward the far wall, where a door stood slightly ajar. "I've been running for 22 years. Time I stopped." The dragging sound grew louder, closer. Claire grabbed Evan's hand and they backed toward the stairwell. The man didn't turn to look at them. When you get upstairs, you'll see another door. It won't be where you remember it being. Go through it, and don't stop moving. They reached the stairs. The air was colder now, their breath visible in faint clouds. Claire clutched the photographs against her chest, feeling the faint warmth radiating from them. Halfway up, she risked a glance back. The man was gone. The far door stood open wider, and something black and shapeless was spilling through, dragging itself across the floor toward the center of the room. She turned away and ran. The stairwell narrowed as they climbed, the walls bending inward like the house was trying to crush them before they reached the top. The grinding roar returned, now undercut with faint, disjointed whispers, snatches of sentences they almost recognized from earlier parts of the night. Claire kept her eyes forward, but Evan's head jerked involuntarily toward the sound. For a split second, the plaster beside him seemed to melt away, revealing a man's face beneath, cheeks sunken, lips cracked, eyes pleading. Evan's foot caught on a step, and he stumbled, but Claire yanked him forward before the wall could reclaim him. At the landing, they found the promised door. It was wrong, an ornate Victorian frame where earlier there'd been only bare wall. The brass handle was cold as ice. Claire shoved it open, and they stepped into sunlight. It was the front lawn of Ridge Lane, overgrown grass swaying in a warm breeze. The sky was pale blue, the air clean, no dust, no rot. For a moment, Evan's knees almost gave way from relief. They stumbled toward the street, the house silent behind them. But halfway down the cracked walkway, Claire slowed. She still clutched the stack of photographs. Curiosity itched at her, too strong to ignore. She pulled the top photo free. It was them again, standing in the hallway. But this time, the thing from the shadow stood between them, one hand on each of their shoulders. Its sewn mouth was split into something that could almost be called a smile. Claire. Evan's voice was barely audible. She looked up from the photograph. The lawn was gone. They stood in the living room again, the sunlight now just a weak amber glow filtering through filthy curtains. The photographs in her hands felt hot, as though they'd been sitting too close to a fire. The grinding in the walls started once more. Slow, steady, patient. Evan's breathing quickened. We didn't. Leave, Claire finished, her voice flat. She turned toward the front door. It was still there, just a few feet away. They ran for it. Her hand hit the knob. The door swung open. And there was the man from the stairwell, standing on the porch, camera dangling from one hand. Only now his face was slack, his eyes black from corner to corner. His lips moved, but his voice came from the walls, the floor, the ceiling, all at once. You're part of it now. The door slammed shut behind them. They were never seen again. Weeks later, when a bank representative entered the property to appraise it for sale, they found nothing unusual, at least at first. But in the upstairs hallway, there was a new photograph hanging crookedly on the wall. It showed a man and a woman, both pale and stiff, standing in a dimly lit corridor. Behind them, a shadow loomed, its face sewn shut. The brass plate beneath the frame read simply, 2003.